The region's name is derived from the phrase Rohang, a historical name for Arakan lands now known as the Rohingya state in Myanmar. It was once a free independent state in Southeast Asia until 1784, when the Burmese conquered the land, annexing it as the 14th province of the Burma Union. Despite a documented history of a significant minority of Muslims living in the area since the 11th century AD, they have always been subject to severe restrictions and discriminations by the Buddhist majority. Muslim persecution in Myanmar during the modern era gained momentum during British rule in World War I and reached its peak in 1962 during General Ne Win. The phenomenon is still ongoing, and the humanitarian situation in the 50,000 square kilometer wide area continues to deteriorate. The United Nations formally regards Rohingya Muslims as one of, if not the, most discriminated people in the world, a situation which is mostly left underreported across the media, even in Muslim countries. Since the establishment of the House of Saud by the British colonial empire back in the 20th century, they have projected themselves as defenders of the Muslim nation. However, in practice, history has proved that the spurious claim is being frequently challenged, whether it comes to defending the cause of Palestine or mistreatment of Rohingya Muslims in the country of their birth, Myanmar. It was back in the 1960s when Rohingyas were systematically barred from the most basic human rights, including citizenship. In response to their protests, they were crushed by the Buddhist army, facing one of the worst waves of ethnic cleansing in Southeast Asia. Saudi Arabia, trying to pose as the Muslim world big brother, tried to seize the opportunity. Rohingyas faced a new wave of bloodshed, which is described by the UN as textbook ethnic cleansing. It has reached a horrendous level just recently.
Gura gura hoina kal gura gura miala hoina kal dila guli mari felaite dikki enu gomanu janodana hora yer be ko hede fulottole be kom plastic hala plastic kal bere yer durma fulottole fudo mada gara felai.
This time, the Saudi regime has been far less forthcoming, with offers of aid being noticeably low-key. The dramatic shifts in the Saudi regime's foreign policy after effective leadership of the Saudi ailing king's favorite son bin Salman and his over-obsession with the consolidation of power inside Saudi Arabia and the unjust war against Yemen have practically left no room for maneuver when it comes to Rohingya's crisis. However, that is not the only motive behind Saudi's lack of interest in Myanmar's developments. The regime's desire to expand its oil market in Southeast Asia and its rivalry in the region with Russia to feed China's expanding oil demand are yet two more key factors in Saudi's opportunistic foreign policy in the region. The regime is now busy with a huge pipeline running through Myanmar which carries oil supplies from the Bay of Bengal to China's landlocked Yunnan province. The 771-kilometer pipeline starts from western Burma's Rakhine state, the exact place where most of the Rohingya have been forced out by Myanmar's army.
This is the case where they thought that a geopolitical deal would benefit the kingdom and, to hell with the people stuck in between. And so we all know that Myanmar would like to see the back of all Rohingya Muslims permanently and to genocide them and annihilate them altogether. And so the Saudi are quite comfortable doing that because they don't really care. Again, that should tell you that the Saudi who continue to say that they speak for the entirety of the Islamic world are not actually at all. If anything, they're just speaking for themselves and the desire that they have to exert their influence onto the Islamic world as opposed to defending it.
But Saudi Arabia's foreign policy in the Rakhine state is not simply restricted to keeping silent about the ongoing Rohingyas massacre. Many Rohingyas regard the Saudis as a dark force in the humanitarian disaster.
Over the past decade or so, there's been an effort on the part of Saudi Arabia to actually infiltrate the Rohingya community and to try to bring them towards Salafism and Wahhabism, to try to exert control onto them. And this has entered into this idea that Buddhists have had in Myanmar, that this particular Muslim community runs counter to their own worldview, their own religious views, and that they need to be annihilated because they are preaching the death of Buddhist and other religious minorities in Myanmar. Rohingya are literally stuck in between, the Buddhists that do hate them and the Salafi who offer them some degree of salvation by way of money and financial support, but at the same time forces them to embrace their literature and their dogmatic ideology. It's very difficult for them to know what to do because on the one hand, they're thinking, why not if Saudi Arabia can offer us some degree of financial support, but at the same time, by doing so, they're actually rationalizing the line of thinking of the Myanmar government by advocating their own death, because they're saying that they are radical elements and needs to be taken out.
The story doesn't simply end here. The Saudi regime is now forcibly removing the stateless Rohingya, deporting them back to Bangladesh, where they could be imprisoned. The removal against their will comes after published evidence by the Middle East Eye suggests that they have been imprisoned for an indefinite period inside a Saudi detention center prior to deportation. According to the Middle East Eye, the so-called illegal Rohingya immigrants were taken to the Shumaisi detention center in Jeddah, where they confessed to coming to the country on fake passports.
They might have acted illegally in the sense that they forged certain documents to get into several countries. We have to understand the context. You cannot apply the law without looking at context. And of course, in this particular context, people were running for their lives. And so one should understand and actually have mercy and show some compassion to their situation. The Saudi couldn't care less. All they saw is that the law needed to be applied to the letter without its context, which is something, by the way, that is very telling of the Saudi regime. Once again, Wahhabism is a dogma that enacts Islamic law divorced of its context and meaning, which is why it's running into the abuses that we have seen lately.